Hey everybody, delighted to have Bill Holter back. Bill's been a regular feature, usually coming every 2 months on the show. Bill, delighted to have you back. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me back, Francis.
We had an interesting chart. In fact, I'm going to, if you permit, just as part of a setup for a question for you that I think you're going to have plenty to say on. Following a similar sound money friend, Tavi Costa, he had a really interesting chart share that sourced Bloomberg. And of course, he was bringing to all our attention, and it showed China's gold rush, which showed the one chart of gold being accumulated by China in white, and the disaccumulation in red of the USDTs and treasuries. So China's holding of treasuries going down. Let's fat line that, in fact, so that everybody sees it super clearly. China's holding in treasuries going down. No surprise there after the Russian events, but and gold accumulation in billions absolutely going up, almost by the amount that there's disaccumulation with a little bit extra, I would argue. How does this play out, and how does this movie end in terms of this course for what's been happening with China and accelerating recently this last quarter that I saw? I think only at least 50 plus billion dollars in treasuries being sold off.
Right. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, if Francis, if you and I understand that the difference between a treasury and gold, I mean, treasuries are a sovereign obligation that can be defaulted on. Gold can never default. So if you and I understand this, the Chinese certainly understand this. And, there's your chart. They're selling treasuries and buying gold. How does it all play out in the end? Uh, I think it's pure math at this point that in current dollar terms, whether it be by printing or outright default, there's going to be a default in the U.S. Treasury market, and that will spread to credit all over the world. So, I mean, that's your final outcome, and your ultimate buyer of last and only resort is going to be the Fed. The Fed is going to be buying treasuries directly from the Treasury, and at this point, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, the Fed and Treasury merged together. So, I mean, it's an in-house circle, if you will.
Yeah. And it's also with that debt collapse, it's going to be contagion through currencies. And joining the final dot, this whole failure is actually the turbo juice for precious metals. Because where else do you run? There isn't another currency or another debt system that you say, oh, well, I don't want to
Right.
hold USD treasuries. How about Japanese bonds? No one's going to be making that move either. It's the turbo juice for the one thing that can't be defaulted on, and that is physical. And that's where physical truly comes into its own, isn't it? In that sense. I mean, is there anything wrong with that statement, or do you agree?
No, that's 100% right. And let me clarify for listeners, you're calling it the turbo juice. Think about this. Think about literally the trillions upon trillions in U.S. Treasuries slash uh, other Western sovereign uh, treasuries slash all Western debt. I mean, you're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars. And if you look at the gold market, I mean, all the gold ever mined uh, in history is what, I don't know, 10 trillion or something like that. So you're trying to put Niagara Falls through a garden hose.
100%. And that can only lead to an immense bull market for which even some of our most leery forecasts could be surpassed in terms of price valuation. How do they prevent that from being the case? Uh, because at the end of the day, they don't want a lot of rich gold bugs either. I get the feeling that the statists want them to own everything and everyone else to have nothing. So even a select few like you and I and the people that typically watch this channel that have made the right investment, how do they take it off us? or do they stop it from getting too disorderly in gold's favor and quickly implement version 2.0 of the system that immediately assumes and is sold with great faith and promised, potentially backed by gold, oil, and some other things before allowing the full gold benefit to occur? How would you visualize? It's a bit of a forward-looking question. There's many things that can happen. We're speculating about the future, but I'm just curious because I'd love to believe that all my gold ounces and silver ounces are going to be allowed to 100x or whatever the multiple will be. But deep down, I don't think that's going to serve their long run objective, even though they're the biggest holders of precious metals as well, certainly China and the central banks.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything they can do uh, to stop the price appreciation. They can try to slow it, and I mean they've been doing that for years, years and years. Uh, we're now at the point where the physical markets are making price as opposed to the paper markets. I mean, there's a battle going on right now, and the winner will be the physical markets, and the loser will be a collapsed and defaulted paper market structure. My guess is, how do they prevent the little guy from becoming wealthy? I think it's a pretty obvious answer. Is what they're going to do is they're going to put a massive tax. Who knows? Maybe 90% on your capital gains in gold and silver. That said, if everything else has become worth nothing, if when I'm say everything else, I'm talking about paper. If paper becomes worth nothing and you've got to pay a 90% tax, your 10% is still huge wealth in a system that has no wealth.
Yeah, it's monkey money that you're giving back to them, you would argue,
Right.
and still may
Exactly.
retaining a large part of the gain. Yeah, that could play out. There's some people will question if it's possible they'd go for the confiscation route, given that it's been tried before. Although, as we've probably
Not in the
discussed in
US.
previous, go ahead.
Not in the US. They can't do that in the US. There's
Hmm.
too many guns. I mean, the Second Amendment guarantees that they will not go house to house.
Yeah, it would be a dangerous one, that one. Yeah, it would be a dangerous one. Excellent. What else? We've got a bit of a two-tier market. I've often speculated, especially when we've spoken paper versus physical, that there could become a two-tier pricing system, and eventually they diverge too much that the paper is no longer considered valid. But we actually have a Chinese price and a COMEX price, don't we, at the moment as well? Tell us your take on that divergence.
Yeah, that's when I mentioned that the physical markets are taking over as far as becoming the pricing mechanism. That's what's happening. There's a $30 to $50 premium in gold on the Shanghai over London over the COMEX, and in silver last week it got up as high as $4. So you're talking about more than a 10% premium in Shanghai versus COMEX versus London, and that is a slam dunk no brainer. You buy silver in the West, you demand delivery, and you sell it, and then send it for settlement in the East. So yeah, the physical markets of Shanghai of China, those physical markets are taking the pricing mechanism away from the West.
Yep. And in some senses, China
And
represents. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to mention something nobody is talking about right now is that for the last, call it 6 months or more, uh, the amount of the debt creation in China has gone negative. And at the same time, their M1 money supply is shrinking. Understand they have a huge amount of debt also. I mean, they're they're also a debt problem. And I made the comment a week or 2 weeks ago that someone somewhere had better start cutting rates. and easing and creating money supply, reflating, if you will. Somebody somewhere had better reflate, or this whole thing is going to come down. And I've said all along, when it comes down, it's going to be a 72-hour event.
Yes, and you're pointing out that in bizarrely, the communist nation has actually been doing more of the right thing. Let's say they're both hopelessly over indebted, but they have in fact allowed their stock market to crash substantially, particularly their tech side. They have in fact actually taken out liquidity, given the exuberance they had in their property cycle. They kind of had a 2008-9 themselves recently, more recently than our great financial crisis. But they seem to be at least taking the punch bowl away, even though they've definitely binged as heavy as anybody else, which is not something we would argue is really happening on the liquidity side. That's another thing that is a bit peculiar for some people. What's your take on, because officially rates have gone up, and they have, and we've gone from about 3 months ago, people expecting 7 rate cuts to maybe one in December, which is quite some readjustment. So feel free to comment on that as well as you go past. But also inside of that, uh, there's still liquidity being provided. We're supposed to be doing tightening, but a lot of people are saying there's no actual real tightening going on. It's a bit like we're putting water on the fire with the rates on one end, but there is a little bit of gasoline going on the other end as well. So it's just being shifted right, if that makes sense. What's your take? Is there real fiscal tightening outside of the monetary policy?
No, there's not fiscal tightening at all. I mean, if the Treasury is borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days, I mean,
Yeah.
that's $1 trillion going into the system and being spent. Um, where it comes from, it basically comes from thin air. It comes from the Treasury issuing the bonds, and some market buying, and a huge amount of Federal Reserve supporting the Treasury market. So from a fiscal standpoint, we're extremely loose. We're looser now than at any point in history. And I will understand the economy, and I'll talk about the United States. The real economy in the United States, I guess you could basically say, exists only because the stock market is providing, if you want to call it, wealth, the feel good effect. People are still spending some money because of the stock markets, because of the financial markets. When the financial markets collapse, the United States is complete toast because we don't have any manufacturing to speak of. I mean, our manufacturing base has shrunk. Compare today to 50 years ago, we were the manufacturing king of the world. Now
Yes.
we don't manufacture anything. So without a robust financial market, the real economy collapses. And it used to be the other way around. It used to be that the real economy supported the financial markets and gave justification for pricing in financial markets. Now it's the other way around. Now it's the tail wagging the dog.
Yep. Very interesting. Also, interesting to see what I would call slightly more mainstream spokespersons sharing some concerns that you and I have spoken about for a long time. We called the top of the bond market in 2020 during the crisis that was, and that it's subsequently going to be a net short, and that it will be disorderly. It won't take 40 years to unwind. Ray Dalio was recently commenting himself of great concern of softness in demand for debt securities. So this is bringing us closer. I know he's not actively working anymore. I think he's in a retired state, but he's on the fringes of going. Soon you'll have the CEO of Goldman Sachs and Larry Fink saying the same thing. It's been coming very much to the mainstream now, and as usual, we're ahead of our time. But he's starting to express that. What does that tell you for how much time we probably have left? If some of the bigger named book publishers, ex big players, there were, names, call them names of bygone eras, are starting to voice the concerns about debt market support. Because I do think at the end of the day, the gold, silver, when we're talking about gold and silver, we're talking about the failure of the fiat paper system, which has overextended its existence. So this is very much part of the gold, silver discussion. And Dalio is quite a big name who's now vocally raising that point. And it certainly doesn't improve the demand having him do so. So surely it can't be too long now, even though we've always thought it's got to come to an end, and there's always seemed to be an extra mile to go. But timing, isn't this another shoe that's dropping?
Yeah, I think it's becoming, the math is becoming too obvious. The math that uh, these treasuries or sovereign treasuries are not going to be able to continually expand debt. The math is so obvious that now you've got
Yeah,
well-known people talking about that problem. That problem ultimately leads to interest rates going straight up. And I say interest rates going straight up because at this point, there is, I don't think anywhere on the planet with a sovereign treasury is there a risk adjusted premium for the possibility of default. There's
yeah,
it's it's thought right as we speak now. It is believed across the world that no sovereign treasury can default. So there's no risk premium. And in my opinion, there's there is in the future going to be a risk premium, and that's going to cause interest rates to explode because there's more risk everywhere than anyone you know even even contemplates. So I think it goes further than what the Ray Dalios of the world are talking about. He's looking at it near term and saying, well, this is unsustainable. If you look at it longer term, yeah, it's obviously unsustainable, but that leads to a collapse in bond prices across the globe and a huge spike in interest rates, which just blows up all the existing debt.
yeah. And puts everyone with leverage into default, basically. And
Right.
once again, would also see those in the know front running and dumping treasuries for anything they could get to try pivot into metals, which will maybe make the multiple back that they've lost on being on the wrong side of the seesaw as it's going below water. Yeah, but yeah, it's unbelievable. And then silver. You mentioned just before we started, you'd put a post up. Do mention your site and where people can find it. But you were also highlighting along with the charts, much like ourselves, that you felt silver was going to start taking out some significant levels since we spoke. Give us your take.
Yeah, I put an article out. You can go to my website. I put it out on May 11th, so you have to scroll down to get to it. But there were three charts: gold, silver, and the HUI mining index. They all looked like they were forming a hook on the MACD. That's the moving average convergence divergence. It looked like they were crossing over at that point in time. They did cross. Silver, I think, was 28.50 in that neighborhood and ran up to 32.50. We've had a couple pullbacks. We're chopping at this morning. I think we're about 30.50, and it wouldn't surprise me to see a test of a harder test than we've already had of 30, uh, maybe 29.75, 29.50. I do believe that you'll see that what was resistance turn out to be support from here, and it would not shock me within 3 to 6 months to see silver uh, in a much more serious battle at the $50 level.
Yeah, and in the not too distant future, I concur. That's our projections as well. What actually was the high on the Chinese markets for silver? Do you know? I'm not quite sure where I can get Shanghai silver pricing from, so I'm a bit blind. But how high did they go? Was it 36 when we were
Yeah, it was
32?
36.58.
Wow,
36.58 is what I saw.
wow. Yeah, and $4 on that, as you were saying, it's well through 10%. It's about 12% price premium on that. And don't forget, you'll still have a premium for your coins. What are eagles selling for? How much do you actually pay for an eagle in the States? Is it what's the premium if to spot at the moment? Do you have an
You're
idea?
looking at 5.5. Yeah, you're looking at maybe 5.5, 6% premium. That's down from typically Eagles were about 7% over spot. So there's been a small uh, movement down in the premiums for gold. There's been a huge drop in premiums for silver. If we were talking a year ago, silver Eagles were $17 over spot. Now you're looking at $7 over spot. I think they got down as low as maybe $4.55. Junk silver, which was $11, $12 over spot, you can buy junk silver now for $2.50 over spot. So the premiums have collapsed, and I'm speaking now from a U.S. perspective. So I'm not speaking in Europe. I don't know
Yeah,
where
yeah,
the premiums are there. Um, but the premiums have collapsed, and I think that's a function of retail. Retail, I'm seeing less people contacting me, whether it be by phone or email or whatever. But I am seeing much larger orders. So the the dollar amount may be higher, but you're not seeing the offer or inventories peppered by 5, 10, 25, $50,000 trades. Now they're 100, 250, $500,000 trades. But the retail premiums have come down, whereas from an institutional standpoint, you can see China is just gobbling up gold and India is gobbling up silver.
yeah. Uh, Interestingly, another news slippage in the gold space is India had 100 tons very quietly repatriated from London quite recently, arrived back, and
Right.
they kept it very quiet in the low low. No one wanted to upset anybody. It's kind of like you've loaned me, I've loaned you money, and I want to ask for it back. I don't want to ruin your day and upset you, but I'm kind of, please, Bill, can I have my time for a payment? It seems very much like that, doesn't it? That kind of news. People are moving for an eventual default. That's how I feel. I mean, it's almost as if it's as you've said, mathematical certainty. Everybody knows what you don't hold, you don't own, and the musical chairs are getting short now. There's only a couple of stools, and there's only a few people left, big dancers left, and you've got to get real close to your stool and keep a very hard eye on it so that you're not left holding the bag. And it seems a bit of that has been going on as well behind scenes, and that one leaked out, and I spotted that. India, of course, a big precious metals nation as well.
Yeah, this India did it differently than if you remember back 10 years ago now, 2013,
Germany, yeah.
Germany asked for 300 tons. And at the time, I actually went and investigated the logistics. And I did that because the response from New York was, oh, well, it's going to take us a long time to get you your gold because the logistics, moving 300 tons is just too hard. It's going to take years. And it did. It took 2 or 3 years to get done. Well, I actually investigated it, and 300 tons could have been moved easily in 4 plane loads. A Boeing 747 cargo plane can carry 95 tons. So
Mm.
if you got 300 tons, you can easily do it. You do 4 plane loads of 75 tons each, and boom, you're done in a week's time. When all was said and done, and the gold finally arrived and was fully uh, transferred to Germany, it was learned that it was not even the same gold. It was
Yeah,
not the bars that Germany originally deposited. The serial numbers were different. It was not the same gold. So what does that tell you? It tells you that that gold had been rehypothecated, and the reason they needed 2 or 3 years to deliver a small sum, 300 tons, the reason it took 2 or 3 years was because the gold was gone. They had to go out and actually source the gold that they had already rehypothecated.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. So that whole notion of named bars and numbered just wasn't accurate, and they just thought we're good for it and we'll get it just before, and we'll stall. We'll always have enough time to stall and get it in as we need, and then we can. I mean, I wondered, were they charging storage on those bars that they'd probably already sold to somebody else? It wouldn't shock me. I think J.P. Morgan was done for that, weren't they?
Um, I don't think it was J.P. Morgan.
One of the
It
big
might have
banks.
been Morgan Stanley. Yeah, it might have been Morgan Stanley back in. It was discovered in 2007 with silver that they had been supposedly storing and charging customers for storage for over 5 years. And it turned out that there was no silver. There was no silver at all. So they were charging for storage on something that didn't exist. And back then there was still the ability to go out and buy that silver, which they did, and they made good on it, and nobody got burned. But once the music stops, everyone's going to get burned. There's not going to be any ability to make things right.
It's more indicative of the degree of integrity that is being enacted and their conduct with regards to client custodial relationships, isn't it? It's more a case of what the hell, we can rip your face off, we can tell a lie and even earn an income on something that we're not even doing, providing we masquerade it at any point that you ask for it, that, as if it was always there. And we'll just buy it in a hurry, and find the money and the supply chain, and providing we have 7 days hustle, and I mean, it can't be considered a system based on confidence and integrity when you hear stories like this, can it?
Yeah, I mean, there is no integrity.
Hmm.
There's no integrity within the system anywhere. So uh, I guess while we're talking about integrity, uh, that leads to, or that leads one to believe there's confidence. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
there's confidence in the system, and the entire system runs on confidence. Thus, it's a con game. It's a confidence game, and when confidence breaks, credit will break, and when credit breaks, you will have what you have, and that's all you have.
yeah,
And what you have, from a financial standpoint, had better be gold or silver because they're the only uh, monies that cannot bankrupt. And we're talking about a credit collapse. And it's important that people don't forget that every fiat currency on the planet is based on credit. So when credit breaks, so does your currency.
yeah. That's such a sound, simple, but very, very deep seated fact that you just stated there, and I really want to underline that. The currencies won't matter. I mean, there's quite a few currencies that have done better than the dollar. You've got, if you take enough decades, the Swiss franc. You can even argue more recently, you've had 3 years of the peso outperforming even the dollar. But it doesn't matter which one you choose. Singapore dollar, the Swiss franc. At the end of the day, if we have a debt-based crisis and all fiats get called into question, even clean faces, not that there are any, but less dirty ones, there's going to be no confidence in them for as long as there's a physical market such as the monetary precious metals. Are there any other assets that you would say, outside of the precious metals group, that you would suggest people could get into, that will withstand, that may have, if we have this demand destroying event and everything could sell off in price for a small while because nobody has any cash and everyone's pinched, but with whatever rebound you would get, what else would do well outside of gold and silver that you like, Bill, that you would say maybe have a bit of this?
Yeah, commodities across the board. I mean, obviously, oil and gas, uh, all sorts of foods. People have to eat. So I mean, and no commodities can bankrupt. The only
No.
problem is the ownership of the commodities. When the
Mm.
system goes down and you're sitting on whatever, $1 million, $100 million of a commodity, and if the system goes to, or when the system does go down, there's going to be a question of ownership. Um, this goes back to the great taking. I mean, you could buy stocks in, Exxon or British Petroleum or whatever. If your broker goes down and those are in street name, you don't even own them. It's on your broker's balance sheet, and those assets will be used to pay their debts. Um, so yeah, there are plenty of assets, I think, that will be good to own. But how do you own them? Do you own them through stocks? Do you own them through futures or options? If that's your form of ownership, unless with the stocks, unless you get the actual stock certificate in hand, you have nothing when this goes down. And I mean, they've plainly told you, you will own nothing. I understand that part via the great taking, but
Yeah.
and you'll be happy part, I don't know how you're going to be happy unless they put something in the water or, put an additive into the chemtrails they're putting up there.
Yeah. Yeah. What about agricultural producing land that is unencumbered by debt uh, as a holding? So agricultural land farming.
Yeah, that will work out when the demand, when things get bad and the demand for food, just because of bankruptcies of other farms, the demand for food uh, will at least be steady, if not more, but there'll be less production. The problem with land, and people ask me this all the time, they're like, "Oh, I don't want to buy gold or silver; those are too risky. I'm going to buy farmland with cash,
Hmm.
so I'll have no problem." Well, first off, there is a problem where you got to pay taxes on it each year. And those
Yeah.
taxes, if you've watched taxes over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, property taxes have exploded. The other problem is land, real estate, all real estate is priced where it is today because credit was available yesterday.
Yeah.
And if credit's not available tomorrow, then who are you going to sell it to?
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that the current prices are where they are and got to where they got to as far as, high pricing. They got to those levels because credit was easily available. When
Yeah.
credit becomes difficult to obtain or impossible to obtain, then basically everything becomes cash and carry.
Yeah,
And
and a lot cheaper, and you get a massive contraction. No, I agreed with that. And even though I said unencumbered by
you get
debt, your
a,
valuation, yeah, go ahead.
you get a yeah, you get a deflation, but not a deflation versus fiat currencies. You get a deflation versus gold and silver.
Yes, yes. And if they are income producing in long term, you will get them that income in whatever becomes the de facto income of the time, and in between, you can take silver and
Right.
gold coins for your produce as well. Um, Yeah. So yeah,
Correct.
coffee beans, for example, going up immensely. We've noticed Arabica, Robusta. You've seen the cocoa markets. All of these things for that's just the hot drinks and beverages. They've really ignited, and we're going to see it across all physical things. How do we resist them
Right.
when they come for the physical things and they want to implement their tokenization game, which is the basis for establishing a derivative proxy of ownership, which will have embedded all of those. I can buy it, all the paperwork's in the ether on the blockchain. We're going to have a real challenge there because I think that's for those of us that do get physical in various ways, gold and silver, etc. It does seem that they want to enforce this 2.0 financial system, which ends up having a register of everything. And that is their long term goal. Look, it's not going to happen overnight. I'm just
Right.
really long shooting here. So forewarned is prepared. But actually we all should be resisting the elimination of cash and resisting tokenization of all assets and not buying things where it comes with a proxy NFT token serial number because those and registered on the chain and pushing back against that. A bit like the green agenda. I mean, there has been quite a good backlash against this excessive, there's too many people on the
Right.
planet, green agendaization. A lot of good information has got out about, Teslas and batteries, how much they actually cost, the cobalt, the copper, how they're not nearly as green as you say, the virtue signaling. So in some senses, the lie got around the planet 3 or 4 times, but that truth does eventually get his running shoes on. And we've been able to. There's much more broad skepticism on the drivers behind, say, the green movement nowadays, and the fact that we can't put homeless people in homes, but trust us, if you pay a little more tax, we're going to save the planet. That kind of agenda. More and more people are waking up on that one. We need the same on tokenization, don't we? I mean, as a concept.
Right. And I mean, that is absolutely the goal, is to put everything put everything on the blockchain so that the globalists, know every single asset that you own down to the stick of gum that you bought yesterday. Uh, they want they want to know everything that you have, and they want control over you. And the problem with that is, you and I doing this interview, as soon as we're done and it goes live, if under that scenario, our accounts would be shut off and wiped out. And it will end up being this, what this is. It's a war between globalism and populism.
Yeah.
And though it looks like the globalists have the upper hand, I think when all is said and done, that's not going to be the case. The populists will have the upper hand, because the populists outnumber globalists. Pick a number: 10 to 1, 100 to 1. The hardcore globalists are probably outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1.
Hmm. Also, Trudeau's announcement of 66% tax above 250,000. uh, He's a particular kind of man-child clown, but he does seem to be the totem pole for taxation
Right,
being the means of compensation for governments' non frugality. So as everybody's being stagflated, they're going to increase taxes. So we're going to have
right,
we're going to really learn, the squeeze, the lemon pip squeeze of both an inflation tax, and then because no one's going to be buying their debt, they're going to need to expend a lot more. They're going to have to live a lot closer to their income from their tax, and the short fix is always up the tax rates. The long of You and I both know that Atlas Shrugged model, it eventually sees people go elsewhere where that's less extreme, and it's short-term thinking. But there certainly seemed to be on the Western side very much of this scramble to go almost socialist, which is gateway drug communism as far as I'm concerned,
right.
in terms of taxation approach, rather than stimulating small business and everything. We've just agreed a mega corporatocracy that seems to get privilege tax, and then the rest, the citizen, draconian levels of pursuit on tax. And I think in the state side, you had how many thousand new tax guys hired, and they were all targeting the Republicans and various other narratives like this. So there does seem to be, if we're watching, what are their strategic moves as the smart people, me and you, Bill, as generals in the counter-revolution army, we're sitting on our horseback with our telescopes, and we're watching this pincer movement, which is, apart from taxation doing the impoverishment of our citizens, they're actually going to come up front with further taxation to justify holding up their failing finances. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is by Canadians. I mean, I'm hopeful that they stand up, start to revolt, and just say no.
Hmm.
But again, it goes back to the globalists versus populists. And unfortunately, we're going to find out as the financial system itself is collapsing.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and
this
it
goes
literally.
back to this goes back
Okay.
to there's going to be more than one reset. There's going to be a first reset, which will fail. The first reset, if you want to call it the attempt to tokenize everything, uh, the attempt to change a fiat currency into a tokenized fiat currency. That's going to fail, and there will be another reset by Mother Nature. And I just believe because of the numbers, when all is said and done, and this may take 10, 20 years to unfold. I ultimately believe that populists will win out.
Yeah, that's an optimistic message. I wish I don't feel as confident, but I hang on to your confidence, Bill. I hang on to your confidence. I was just bitterly disappointed by the levels of pushback to the events of March 2020 and that season. I thought, if we'd only had more people that were just refusing compliance and people were just eating it and behaving and falling in line and doing what they were told, and the police were just hammering citizens for sitting on park benches. And I have a message for police. The minute you become the globalist bouncer, you're no longer working for me, you're working against me. And you need to think real hard if your families are in the same neighborhoods as the rest of us. We're offering you the hand of friendship, but don't become that guy. And I fear that, and it's also possibly the reason. What do you make of the immigration? This obvious flood of immigration that even now America is finding itself, and it's not unfortunately brain surgeons and people that are wanting to bring skill sets. It is a lower education pegging, massive overwhelm on
Right.
your southern border. Is there darker agendas behind this?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they want to homogenize the earth. They don't want a white race. They want, if you want to call it, just a gray race, one gray race. Uh, Going back to what you said about COVID back in March of 2020, yeah, there was a big division. That was one of the, I've talked about slicing the pie time and time and time again, where you divide the country or the population in half. And if you divide it, 10 times or 20 times, then the group that's in your slice is a very small group. What's happening now, though, is truth is starting to come out. They had a pretty big uh, demonstration in Japan yesterday regarding the and the people who are dying have already died from the vaccine. So that truth is coming out. There's a lot of truths that are coming out, and as each truth comes out, or if you want to call it, a thread hangs loose, these threads are getting pulled on, and even the less intelligent people on the planet are are now becoming able to see, hey, wait a minute, they lied to me on this, they also lied to me on that, now they want me to do this. I don't think I want to do this because they've lied to me. And I think it's important that truth continues to roll out day after day because more and more people are waking up on a daily basis. People knew for a long time and have known for a long time, wait a minute, there's something not really right, but I don't know what it is. And now, as these truths are starting to come out, people are figuring out, hey, wait a minute, I know what it is. My government has bullshitted me my entire life.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. As simply said as you can say it by a straight talking man. I mean, just on that one, I won't read the title just for once. We'll still hope to get this out on YouTube. But if you have a read of that just to yourself quietly in your head, and this is children we're talking about, and that ailment is one of the most core central things that they have the freshest tissue of their young bodies that you never should be getting that level. And now that's truth. Probably the most extreme and the most criminal aspect of this was the manner in which juveniles and even heading to toddlers have been affected by exactly this, and are the sole cause, or the cure was the sole cause in that one. And yeah, I find that quite a tell. I mean, I suppose a meme of where I currently at the moment, Bill, is this fella. Whenever I'm sitting and I'm hearing, and no matter where I go, people are complaining about inflation, and the guy on the right there, and I do feel like that Joker with the slightly bored and bemused face in the funny outfit and the glib expression. Me realizing that, and you can substitute America, the West, it can be Canada, Australia, all of them, the Commonwealth, has already been destroyed, and we're all just going through the motions until the final total catastrophic collapse of the currency system hits. And if there was a meme that I found that reflected my current disposition about the global economic system, I don't think I could find one more accurate than that. However, within all of that, and that cynicism and sort of morgue humor, we also have to remember that it's a beautiful life, and there's going to be real opportunities for the nimble, the smart as well. And in finishing this video, I'd love you to give your uplifting comment for those that are watching, why in actual fact they can come out better than they currently stand as a result of this. And we are actually cleaning out a big pustulant wound that was always going to get to this peak septicemia that it's now at.
Uh, well, I don't know if this is going to be uplifting or not. I guess ultimately it's uplifting. But to get from here to there, it's going to be a complete shit show. I mean, the financial system, the way it is right now, mathematically untenable, but it's been in place since 1945, since 1913, since even longer than that. So this is something that has gone on for generations, if you will. This is not something that we're going to have a bad month or a bad 6 months. This is going to wipe the system clean, and you're going to have to survive to get to the new system. Now, hopefully, uh, we go through a reset, we go through another man-made reset, maybe. But the ultimate Mother Nature reset will be a huge transfer of wealth from those who lived and saved in the old system versus who lived and saved in real money. Real a huge amount of capital, a huge amount of value is going to accrue to those who have saved in real money. In other words, bought gold, bought silver, invested in gold mines, silver mines, coal mines, oil wells, real stuff. So there's going to be a huge transfer of wealth in that direction. But again, you have to be alive at that point in time. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I don't know how long it's going to take, but you've got to be alive to benefit from that accrual of wealth. And when I say you have to be alive, for if for 6 months or a year or God forbid 2 years time, you weren't able to go to a grocery store or uh, even a hardware store because things are going to break. If you don't have food, if you don't have supplies on hand, how are you going to make it a year, 2 years, 3 years? Who knows how long it's going to take. My point being, people today, the knowledge, the technology to farm, to ranch, 100 years ago, what was it, 80% or more or
Mm,
150 years ago, 80% or more of Americans were farmers. They farmed. That technology is gone. There are big corporations now that are doing the mass farming and sending food to grocery stores. When that stops, how many people are still going to be alive in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years? And you know that the WEF has stated their global population goal is 500 million versus the current, what is it, 8 billion now. So you're talking about, you know, 15 out of 16 people dying to get down to that 500 million population. And obviously, one of the plans was the clot shot. Uh, who knows what they're putting into chemtrails, whether that's just dumbing people down or does that have bad health ramifications? If food's not available, that's another way to kill the population off.
mm.
Uh, in a system down scenario, are you going to have clean water? So, I mean, it boils down to, the most basic of basic water is your water that you're going to be drinking and using. Is it clean? Or does that kill you? So, when they tell you you're going to own nothing, and I don't know about the you'll be happy part, but when they say that you'll own nothing, and when they say that they want a population of 500 million on the planet, believe they're going to try to do that because
Yeah,
they will. They are. They're trying right now. And let me just finish with this. A lot of people ask, and have been asking for years and years and years, when? When? When's it all going to happen? When? Open your eyes. It's happening on a daily basis. You're living through it. It's being done to you in very small daily increments so that you don't notice. But it's been happening, it is happening, and it's going to come to a crescendo very soon.
yep, yep. We're going to run an obstacle course, and the goal should be to survive that, and make sure you come out
Exactly.
the other side. Yeah. 100%. Bill, thank you very much for today. Where can folks engage with you to get your newsletter? Well done on the call for silver, by the way, and the breakout to new highs. We were echoing something similar. That's a great call. And as you suggest, I think I concur with your once resistance, now support. How do people find you and follow you further?
You can go to my website. It's simply billholter.com. There is a contact button on there, or if you want to reach me directly, my business email is bholter at proton.me.
Excellent. For all our viewers, we'll also put that in the show notes below. Thank you again for your time, Bill, and I'm sure there'll be more shoes dropping for us to discuss next time. And until then, keep safe and be well. And thank you for showing up for our show here.
Thank you. You too.
Bye for now.